You don't stab yourself 13 times and then walk a half mile and die next to a tree. A Noble Lie, Oklahoma City, 1995. This is a documentary from 2011. It's by Free Mind Films, and it was directed by James Lane. Why are we talking about this particular movie? Well, we're talking about conspiracy documentaries for the first few of these different episodes. And this one, I think, is one of the most important ones for anybody to see. It sheds light on answers long ignored and censored by both prominent media outlets and the U.S. government. A Noble Lie peels back what we thought we knew about the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing and its perpetrators. That's sort of the official synopsis of this movie. For me, this is going to be an overall summary of not just Timothy McVey in Oklahoma City, but it's going to talk about false flags. It's going to talk about something called sheep dipping, CIA, and something called PatCon, Patriot Conspiracy. It is a primer on some of the most mind-blowing claims by witnesses, victims, first responders, police, senators, just everyone across the board, news anchors. In my mind, this is sort of the 9/11 precursor. This was like the practice run for 9/11. So everything that you might have come across in the 9/11 conspiracy theories and the ones that we'd already seen, loose change. This is sort of the loose change of Oklahoma City.
You took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly how I perceived it when I watched it. And being the first time tuning into it, it hits you consistently with the same aspect that loose change does, where it's eyewitnesses, first encounters, evidence, cover-up evidence, news clips, where you have the plethora of all the evidence, and even scientists and experts on these different events that happen and questioning the official narrative.
All right, let's plot the course for Noble Lie. This one makes a whole bunch of different claims, and it starts with a quote from Plato's Republic. And the quote says, "A noble lie," or at least it's talking about Plato's Republic, "A noble lie refers to the propping up of a myth in order to maintain social harmony and keep the elites in their present position." So that's what the movie is defining a noble lie, and that's where it's getting its namesake from. The very first claim, the important one, is that more than Timothy McVey was involved in this, and Nichols, right? Terry Nichols, the guy that he meets in the military. But it goes way beyond just them being more than the other ones involved. It talks about how this lone wolf theory was put forth by government agencies to kind of put a nice little bow on this and not let it meander and start having people looking into all different avenues. So the lone wolf theory is completely fabricated, according to this movie, that there were links between the FBI, the SPLC, Southern Poverty Law Center, John Doe 2, the ATF, the CIA. Who else knows? I mean, you could just throw a dart at a board at this point and say that they were involved in this, but there's also some receipts. They get into this place called Elohim City, which is way deep down this rabbit hole. I'm not even going to go on this tangent, but it gets all the way into Elohim City. It gets into a guy named Strassmeyer, who is brought in from Germany, which they sort of insinuate is a CIA operation, and put him inside of Elohim City. that Elohim City had literal CIA spy satellites hovering over it to do all sorts of surveillance on what was going on in this area. And that once Timothy McVey went to this place, Elohim City, that essentially he becomes radicalized, probably by design, which is what this movie sort of sets forth, is that he was sent there by the CIA or by the government in order to infiltrate this group at Elohim City, and that it all kind of springs from this. And then again, this thing called PatCon or Patriot Conspiracy was an initiative by the FBI and maybe a few other alphabets, but that the FBI to infiltrate every neo-Nazi, patriot group, and militia in the entire country, to get an informant in every single one of these groups and then slowly dismantle them from within. So this is the whole premise, is that not only was it more than McVey and more than John Doe 2, but it was the CIA, the ATF, the FBI, the freaking Southern Poverty Law Center of all places, that they're all in on it.
And they even have news footage of the time where they're talking about there was 2 Middle Eastern men in sweatsuits and that they were on a manhunt for them, and the whole narrative switches to this lone wolf by himself, and they kind of delve deeper into some of the other claims that connect to this.
Another major claim is essentially that this was a false flag operation, inside job. And I guess that kind of goes without saying if you're saying that the FBI and the CIA and the ATF are all in on this. So to explore that a little bit further, some of the specific claims were that other bombs were found at the scene, other unexploded ordinances, that the ATF and FBI bomb squads were both seen prior to this happening. In one case, they were across the street 2 hours before the attack, that a recorded phone call was made to the FBI 24 minutes before the Murrow building fell, saying that the Murrow building had just been bombed. 24 minutes before it actually happened, they get a call stating that the governor, Frank Eating's brother, Mark Eating, was writing a spy novel at the time, which had a main character that was going to bomb the Murrow building, and his name was Thomas McVey instead of Timothy McVey. Just a coinky dink. That there is surveillance tape footage of the Ryder truck and people getting out, which the jurors were not allowed to see for security reasons. That the truck bomb itself could not have made that same pattern. That the bombs that were reported going off inside the building before the truck, and actual survivors that said that they were in the building and heard the explosion under them and felt the ground lift up under their feet prior to this truck bomb going off. That a retired Air Force general named Benton K. Parton, who was the former director of the United States Air Force Armaments Laboratory, his entire career was literally spent doing bomb blast analytics for the military. He says that this could not have happened from a truck exploding, that it needed to have essentially ordinances placed on all of the different pillars. Again, we've seen loose change before. This is the same story all over again, that there had to be some sort of bombs placed on all of the pillars in order for this amount of damage to happen. That even Eglin Air Force Base did tests and determined that the truck bomb could not have caused this, that each of the barrels inside this Ryder truck would have acted as individual bombs going off, almost working against each other as opposed to one big cohesive explosion. They have witnesses on camera in this documentary talking about how they saw men putting putty and wires on the columns of the building in the parking garage before this had all happened. That the ATF was keeping an illegal armory in the Murrow building. That they were not supposed to be keeping any explosive, any firearms, any ammunition at all in this building. It was supposed to be admin only, yet there is video footage of ATF agents in the wreckage pulling away ordinances, pulling away M16s, all sorts of things that were not supposed to be in there. That the Murrow building also, coincidentally enough, happened to be where they were storing all of the paperwork regarding Mena, Arkansas scandals with the Clintons and the Iran-Contra documents, which would have implicated Bush and Reagan. So just another coincidence that all of these legal documents get wiped out, sort of two birds with one stone. There's footage of the ATF, again, pulling out unexploded ordinances. that the ATF denied keeping anything in the building despite all of this footage, and that basically all this was suppressed by the media. So this has got all the hallmarks of a false flag operation. It's basically, again, 9/11 for beginners.
Yeah, and you could see that because when you do see the footage of them pulling out the M16s out of the rubble, and what looks to me, I mean, they make the claim in the film that it is explosives. It does look like that, and that the ATF agents also were notified by, I believe it was saying like a pager or some kind of note of, hey, don't be here that day. The same things that we heard at 9/11, where certain people were like tipped off of like, yeah, you might want to call in sick today. Won't be the day to be there. And even as far as some of the inconsistencies of the ATF story of they have an elevator maintenance guy that claims that what the ATF agent that says he went through all these floors and he miraculously got up and was able to be a hero and save people. The maintenance elevator guy reveals that that's impossible, that he couldn't have been on there because of where he was at. And all of the firsthand experience. And what it does show too is that the local media actually did a way better job, because I was remembering back when I was first seeing that as like, you know, I think I was like a young, maybe 10, 11, I'm not sure exactly, 95, somewhere around there. I saw the national media. And when you saw what the local media was saying, it was a totally different story.
I remember this one too. I remember I was probably in, I want to say like 7th or maybe 8th grade when this happened, and this was one of those moments where you stopped what you were doing and the teacher put on the news and everyone just kind of watched. And maybe I didn't appreciate what was happening. I saw a big building that was falling down, but that this was like a 9/11 prior to a 9/11. So the next big key point is specifically about this media cover up. This documentary makes a few claims that 2020 did a segment by reporter Roger Charles, and that the feds stopped 2020 from airing their segment on a lot of these inconsistencies. That by the very next day after the bombing happened, the news stations, like you were just mentioning, all these national news stations, they went from talking about John Doe 2 to talking about these other unexploded ordinances, like talking about multiple explosions, to completely ignoring all of those facts after less than 24 hours, and going so far as to claiming anyone else bringing those things up, which they had just been talking about the day before, now that was all conspiracy theory and conjecture and not official record. That there was only one local station out of the entire country that was K4 TV, KFOR TV, and they continue to talk about multiple accomplices, to talk about all the prior warnings. And wouldn't you know that the New York Times purchases K4 TV and then immediately fire the programming director? They fire the lead journalist, lady named Jana Davis, and then all other reporting that contradicted the official narratives vanished at that point. That was the last bastion of anyone talking about all these anomalies. And as soon as New York Times bought them and fired everyone involved with that story and that investigation, now all of a sudden there was just the official story. So it's an interesting take on this, showing exactly how the media was able to suppress all of this.
Yeah, and it kind of goes on theme of pretty much the theme in the last probably 6, 7, 8 episodes we've been doing is always the media covering up somehow. And it does highlight heavily on this of how easily it's done, because once the narrative is switched to now it's a lone wolf, McVey, everybody just keeps talking about that until you forget about everything else.
The next big point is kind of two different ones. It's about two different people that die throughout the course of this. One of them is a first responder police officer named Terrence Yeekey, and that morning he was issuing just a regular traffic ticket about 4 blocks away from the explosion. As he's writing this ticket, the explosion goes off. He stops writing the ticket. He goes over to be on the scene, and he immediately saves 8 people from the wreckage. And again, this is as the local news was reporting, bombs are still going off. There's still unexploded ordinances. So he quite literally saved 8 different people from the scene. And then he turns up brutally murdered soon after this, after claiming that he also ran into all these weird inconsistencies and anomalies. Another person that died throughout the course of this is a guy named Kenneth Trinidad, who basically dies in prison because he has the unfortunate coincidence of having the exact same tattoo as another person, which is completely unrelated, a guy named Richard Guthrie, who was part of this Elohim City clique, that was part of maybe someone that Timothy McVey had encountered and was, planning on bombing this mural building. Lots of evidence to support that. Well, Kenneth Trinidad also has a dragon tattoo on his forearm, on his left forearm, the same place that Richard Guthrie does. And it gets its way through the system like, hey, you guys in prison have someone that might know about this. And essentially that the FBI tortures this poor guy to death. And oopsie, a case of mistaken identity. But this mishap ends up leading his brother, who is an attorney, to just go full terrier and not let go and investigate this all the way to its depths. And we'll get into this on the deep dive, but that's a pretty major claim that these two very specific people were literally murdered to cover up part of this false flag.
And it's kind of unique how like they actually run into it, because how Jesse gets involved and that he really has just a mistaken identity. And now this is his life work of where he's going to figure out what really happened there. I think that coincidence is significant.
The last major key point that this documentary tries to claim was that McVey was sheep dipped, that McVey was not some random hillbilly hick that gets radicalized and ends up becoming a militia, right-winger, neo-Nazi that just wants to bomb a federal building. That actually, he's in the military, he gets drafted in the special forces, he gets a special order that now, as part of him being in special forces, he's going to infiltrate these right-wing militia groups, and that he's going to basically find someone that's going to be a patsy, not realizing that he himself is the patsy. He's going to be the one that is shown to be the extremist that bombs this building, when in reality, they kind of paint it as if he was going to get in here and find the people trying to do this and then stop them at the last second, or who knows. That part kind of remains unanswered. And some of the specific claims were that in the military, he got all these different security clearances, that he was selected out of his special forces training, but then officially on paperwork, he drops out. He gets washed out of this training, but they make the claim that no, that was actually him graduating. And because they needed him to go undercover in the real world, they had to make it look on paper as if he had washed out of the military and now has a bone to pick with the federal government because of this washout, hence being accepted in all these extremist groups. And that he wrote all of this to his sister. There's actual letters in his handwriting that were sent that says, hey, exactly what happened. I got recruited. I'm doing these super secret missions. Probably a security violation in order to actually write that out. I'm sure there's like an NDA somewhere that says you're not allowed to do that. But that's the other major claim this movie makes, that not only was he a patsy, but he was a patsy working for the government.
And as you said, sheep dipped is where you are officially on the books off of it and some kind of honorable discharge. I think in there they claim something with his feet, that like he had a problem with it and they let him go, but he's officially out, but unofficially still in a lot of covert operations. And it at the time, because you remember you still had a Waco, so they were kind of going a lot through these sovereign right-wing militia types, and even like the white supremacists and all that, like different groups. And he fit in perfect with that. And as you said, he was unaware that he was the main patsy going to be used for this. And I think even at times they mentioned in the film that he was mad that they had switched it up. Because I think at one point it was this Middle Eastern terrorist narrative, and they switched it into what he was doing. And I don't think he was happy about the building that they were going to blow up.
For me, the hidden treasures of this particular documentary, lots of news interviews with the jurors on the Nichols case, talking about how dissatisfied they were and how the FBI had fumbled this and how they weren't getting the full story. This is not conspiracy theorists. These are jurors on the case. Exactly the same from family members, Terrence Yeeke's family members, other people that were actually survivors of that scene. All of them talking about, we heard about extra bombs, we heard the police telling us to get back. All this is backed up. This is not just people posting on the internet about it. So that gives it an insane amount of credibility. They also have eyewitness that talks about seeing the ATF bomb squad at the building before any of this goes down. And they make a note of why that was specials, because this in the Murrah building, they had ATF offices, but they were admin offices that they never saw anyone dressed up in even a jacket that said ATF on it. If anything, they were all undercover, or they were operating as if they were just any other corporate. They may even mention some of them show up, they kind of look like druggies or drug addicts, that they're all playing a part. But that this morning in particular, now you got guys actually dressed up with all their ATF gear, which completely stood out. There's live footage of newscasters as they're reporting the scene, and you can hear the police in the background saying, get back, we found more bombs, we've got more devices, get back. So again, this is not conjecture. You can hear them getting pushed away 2 blocks away from this bomb scene, where they're claiming more devices are being found inside the building, not around the truck, which in the official story is the only thing that blew up, was just this truck bomb that was parked outside. They also have all these different clips showing them finding all these extra devices. And then for me, you would have to know who this person is, but they have an interview with a lady named Wendy Painting. And for me, this is a hidden treasure, because Wendy Painting wrote a very comprehensive book on this topic called Aberrations in the Heartland of the Real, which is all about the sheep dipping and the connections with McVey and Nichols. And it is an insane amount of information that will absolutely blow your mind. And the fact that they have her in this documentary being interviewed about it, I didn't even think that she was a real person. I thought there was a chance that she was just like a pseudonym made up by some kind of insider. So to actually put a face to a name and know that it's a real person, allegedly, was kind of a nice treat.
And some of the hidden gems for me, you mentioned earlier, like the novel twist. They just had a lot of things that I had never heard before. The twist with the novel of Thomas McVey, a lot of the brother being mistaken for Wild Bill, and him being one of the guys that blows off the top of a lot of these things because of a personal vendetta of finding that your brother has a misidentity. And then I also thought a lot of with the ATF and the sheriff bomb squad car being in front of. I didn't hear that before until I watched this film. The bomb squad, even the sheriff's bomb squad, was there that morning of the bombing, and they claim, oh no, he was just driving around running errands in a bomb squad car that, like, it's not just like a regular police vehicle. It almost looks like a tow truck that's carrying a trailer. So I find it hard to believe that you would just be driving that around doing your regular errands, like, I gotta go pay some bills. So I thought that was significant. And the eyewitness testimonies are great because they even have victims, victims' family members there. They have people that were there in the building, people that helped save people. They really go across the board of, again, like loose change. You come with the receipts of the people that were actually there that day, the first responders, the people inside of the building, the families, the survivors of the victims. And they all have their accounts, and they all say the same thing that you heard in 9/11 in Loose Change. Hey, we hear all these extra bombs. And I think you alluded to it earlier, and I think you're absolutely right. This was almost like the test run for 9/11. Hey, let's see how this goes.
For me, there was no overboard moment for this. I couldn't find a flaw. I couldn't find a place where it dragged. Yes, I'm incredibly biased in this regard, but they didn't have the man on the street interviews. They didn't have any weird gotcha questions. They didn't pull up any unsubstantiated rumors, aside from things that we see. Even the media is now, claiming, here's what the eyewitnesses at the time. So I can't find any fault at all with this documentary. I understand that means I'm probably overlooking a lot of bias, but man, this one feels like a supreme example of documentary done right.
I have to agree with you. Now, I will go to a cop out and go back to almost the same thing I said about Loose Change, because I feel like these films are really like, they mesh well together, right? They have a lot of the same feel. maybe not as much tightness as Loose Change, but that, like we said, that was like the second edition anniversary, like special package. But I think if you were a hardcore patriot, where you're like, hey, America, the government would never do that. Like, that's the only, and I don't know that would still be today how people would think. But at that time in 2011, I could imagine people being still a little upset. Children died there, that kind of thing. But other than that, there's nothing really for me, because it flows well. You get a good perspective of all that happened that day from eyewitnesses and people, boots on the ground, that witness what happened. So it's really hard for me and a first time watcher. So you would think, I guess I have bias because I don't like the government and the ATF and IRS and whatever letters you attach to it. But he was very thorough in this film of, here's the evidence, here's the news clips, this is what they're saying, not making crazy claims, but kind of proving the point.
And there are some crazy claims to be made about Oklahoma City and McVey. And I almost wanted to cite maybe that as where it fell short, is it didn't include some of those crazier claims, but that's almost to its own advantage, to its own credit. It doesn't get into talking about Jolly West and MK Ultra research and the fact that Timothy McVey also worked at a aeronautic company that was the site of many different UFO sightings. Like, you can go so deep that Timothy McVey himself went to Waco during the Waco siege when David Koresh and the Branch Davidians were all there. And there are so many rabbit holes here. And this documentary does not go into nearly any of them. I'm actually surprised that it even brings up PatCon. But again, like, this is all to its credit and not to its detriment. All right, let's do a deep dive on this one. It kind of feels important that the deep dive is going to be about something I'm a little bit biased on. So I've actually talked to Tanya Yiki, who was the wife of Terrence Yiki. I've had her on a podcast before. I've talked to her directly. We also message each other sometimes back and forth about just silly conspiracy memes and stuff. But there's a very personal connection with this. So I'm really interested in this claim that Terrence Yiki, this first responder, this hero that saved 8 different people, found some sort of information that he thought was explosive enough that he had to keep hidden, didn't tell his friends or family about it, and was putting all of this research he was finding into a storage unit, and that he was killed on his way to this storage unit in the most brutal way. So here are some of the details of the Terrence Yiki situation. Again, he was issuing a traffic ticket 4 blocks away. He was not involved in this in any direct way. He just happens to be right by the scene. Here's the explosion, runs there, saves 8 people, and then soon after is brutally murdered. Not only is he brutally murdered, the crime scene is completely destroyed. It's turned, the soil all around the area is turned up by spade shovels. That the last thing that he said to somebody was that he'll have to meet him up later because he's trying to lose these feds that were following him. That it was a torture homicide, as per the autopsy made. That both jugular veins had been cut. He had handcuff marks around his wrists. That he had multiple cuts all over his body, and that there was a small caliber head wound that entered from the top of his head and exited through his other side of his jaw with no powder burns on the head. That this was a report on the body, that no autopsy was actually performed on the body. There was a toxicology report done that showed that he had no drugs or alcohol in his system, despite the fact that police and friends were all told that when he died, he was high and he was drunk and he had relapsed and was going through some sort of mental episode. The official cause of death was ruled as a homicide. Let me say it again. The official cause of death was ruled as a suicide, but this documentary has some people that make a good case that logistically this was impossible. One of the quotes was, "You don't stab yourself 13 times and then walk a half mile and die next to a tree." And not only that, but that the car that he was in was completely locked, the windows rolled up, and the keys left in the ignition. So somehow this guy goes from stabbing himself 13 times, cutting both jugular veins on his neck, putting handcuffs around his wrists, and then getting out of his car and walking half a mile and then dying next to a tree. That all of the different dirt around him had been turned up by these spade shovels. By who? So this was the most sort of suspicious circumstances around this Terrence Hickey death.
Yeah, that it was terrible. And if you think about it, it reminds me of the Gary Webb situation, where, hey, how do you shoot yourself in the back of the head twice? Like, you know what I mean? These questions. It's funny because the conspiracies that they're covering or trying to shed light onto is usually not as crazy as whatever supposedly happened to them, right? Like, hey, yeah, he locked his car and sliced both jugulars and just was like, I'm out of here. Like, that just doesn't make any sense to me.
The other part of this equation too is Kenneth Trinidad. So the story of Kenneth Trinidad, that he's in prison and that he has a record for robbing banks, and this also is what one of the reasons that he gets confused with this Richard Guthrie guy, because Richard Guthrie had also been robbing banks and using that money to fund an actual right-wing sort of militia extremist community. And that because of the tattoo and because of the bank robber background, this is the origin for this case of mistaken identity. Here's some of the details. They claim that that when they went to check the cell, they spray luminol, right? This is where like you detect bodily fluids. They spray luminol in a cell and the entire cell lights up, meaning that there is blood on the walls, floor, ceiling, everything in the cell. So it all likely happened in his prison cell. That within 1 hour of his death, he had the equivalent of 30 bottles of Coca-Cola in his system. And the reason for this is they explained that caffeine, high doses of caffeine, is used in third world countries to enhance pain when they're doing these torture techniques, these enhanced interrogation sessions. That there were beatings on the bottom of his feet, meaning they were torturing him by whipping his feet. And that his brother, Jesse Trinidad, he essentially believes that this was the result of the FBI interrogating him. And the reason he believes this is because Jesse gets a message from Timothy McVey, and Timothy McVey tells him, hey, I think the FBI killed your brother because they thought he was Richard Guthrie, this guy, aka Wild Bill, who ran the Aryan Army, who was behind this thing called the Midwest bank robberies. And that Richard Guthrie was, by many reports, he was likely this John Doe #2 character. It was all a case of mistaken identity, and all Jesse knew was that his brother was not the perpetrator of this, and that his brother was clearly tortured to death. It wasn't just a routine death inside of a prison. He wasn't looking into Oklahoma City. He wasn't even around Oklahoma City. This was completely unrelated from anything Oklahoma City. But every single time he kept looking into this, that's all it kept leading back to. So now Jesse Trinidad is sort of at the heart of even like the modern day look into Oklahoma City and Timothy McVey.
And I think the John Doe 2, in my opinion, I mean, they don't really spell it out in that, but it kind of gives you a feel of it, that he was really the person that was supposed to be the patsy, that they can go after these groups. And for whatever reason, if they lost him or can't find him or he was killed, then they had to find, like, it kind of blurred the lines. And because McVey reaching out to Jesse, that tells me that he had knowledge of who was supposed to be the fall guy. That's what it made me feel like.
The ripples and waves made by this particular documentary might be a little bit hard to pinpoint, because I think it might be less about this documentary, A Noble Lie, but more about revealing this whole PatCon conspiracy. The fact, allegedly, that Oklahoma City was an inside job false flag, that Timothy McVey was maybe sheep dipped. Even if he wasn't, his background in the military is well worth looking into. This is such a deep and complicated story, and incredibly relevant today, because if you look, if there were a Patriot Conspiracy, if there were this conspiracy by the FBI and allegedly ATF and CIA and every other alphabet that if they were using this premise in order to move forward more legislation and to beef up their numbers and to get more funding, you don't have to look very far versus like J6, right? The January 6th event kind of has this same premise written all over it, where there's an opportunity to cause an incident and then blame a small faction of extremists on that incident and then use it to invoke all sorts of extra political change and more rallies and people going to jail and using that as legal precedent. So if anything, we are still watching this PatCon in the works, right? Like we are still living through it. And I think that this movie sheds a lot of light on that. And if you haven't seen it before, I absolutely think that you should watch it.
And it kind of gives you the feel of like, you know, the Patriot fronts where you see them marching out, these guys. And when people call them feds, these are the reasons why people call them feds. And one of the big influences too is James Corbett did a movie, a little film called Secret Life of Timothy McVey. It's about like an hour footage, and it really focuses on specifically the sheep dipping aspect of the MK Ultra. And they got most of the information from this film, which I actually saw the James Corbett film, and I didn't realize that this film inspired of that film. So I think it did have some influence again on key figures in this sphere, and the narrative of it was an inside job and the proof to prove it, that the government knew prior to this happening that this was going to happen.
And I mentioned that this was one of my hidden treasures, that they had a interview with Wendy Painting, and she wrote that book, Aberrations in the Heartland of the Real. So if you want to get even more in depth on all of this and all of the truly extraordinary claims that she backs up in her book, I highly recommend that one. There's another book called Bad Company, which is even more wild. It's a little bit less about McVey and a lot more about Richard Guthrie and the Aryan Army and the bank robbers. And dude, it is the most wild story. In fact, after I read both of those books, I started working on a graphic novel about this entire event, about Timothy McVey in Oklahoma City. It's only in script form. I haven't gotten to the point just because there's not a lot of people in the comic book world that are like, yeah, we want to expose the false flag of Oklahoma City. It's like, just by me bringing that up most of the time, they look at me like, you know, I'm in a militia or I'm about to put on a hood or ask them to join some crazy, you know, cult in like Arkansas. So, but it's more relevant than ever, even in 2025. All right, Noble Lie, Oklahoma City, 1995. Produced in 2011, Sink or Swim.
Michael Phelps, baby. This is the Michael Phelps for me. This is just swimming through with ease, winning gold. You know what I mean? This is up there. For the first time I've seen it, I'm going to have to watch it again because it's going to be on my list of like loose change. It's one of the top documentaries I've ever seen, in my opinion.
100%. No surprise here. This one is a swim for me. Michael Phelps all the way. He's bringing home the you know, $5 foot long, everything. Like Michael Phelps, 100%. If you haven't watched this documentary before, you have to go. You can just search for Noble Lie on pretty much any platform, and you'll find this entire movie, pirated or not. You'll find the entire thing. There are zero excuses for you not to watch this. So highly recommended. You kind of have to at this point.
Or just stop looking into conspiracies.
I'll let you announce what's next up on the horizon because we got kind of a special treat. We're going to do a little theme for the next month. What's the theme going to be?
You heard of Shark Week? This is Alex Jones month. We're going heavy-handed with the top. We haven't picked quite. I'm going to do a little Russian roulette of Alex Jones from one of his some older to like more present, so we could get a gauge of where good old Alex is now.
I'm excited, and we can't really say that we went directly into conspiracy documentaries and not have at least one Alex Jones. So we're going to have 3 Alex Jones. So that's what's on the horizon. I hope you're ready for it. Our bias will probably be shown, although I don't know. We might surprise you on our takes on these movies coming up. So I'm excited about these next few, man.
Yeah, me too. And see how well they hold up.
All right. Well, that's another episode of Under the Docks. Peace.
Peace.
Rothschild mansion, creepy halls behind every door, a cloaked body. Don't you know this is Illuminati? They would put the naughty in Illuminati. We expose the hot bodies of Illuminati. Then we put the naughty in Illuminati. Mind control of your soul, of that body.
Are you ready to reveal all there is to see? Esoteric secrets revealed in all of their glory. The Illuminati series from Paranoid American. Putting the naughty in Illuminati. More details at paranoidamerican.com.
Paranoid. Yo. I scribble my life away, driven to write the page. Will it enlighten your brain? Give you the flight, my plane, paper the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel when it's real to real. You will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the Lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hate, maybe your language, a game, how they playing it well without Lakers. Evade them, whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, met is the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blunt smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Man, it's not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when the beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck the niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal, you're welcome. Yet they doing it still, you're welcome.